know about them in the next session. Okay. At the end of the session, so if you joined just today, no need to worry about that. You continue. How many sessions backup have finished? The backup for every session that you missed out, I will give. Don't get panic into that part, and don't be very concerned about that, because I will give you every backup of what the sessions you missed out. That should not be a concern. Just start listening to today's concept. You can understand, right? Yeah. So yesterday we discussed about the basic differences. So what are the features of TypeScript? What are the features of TypeScript? Some important features we discussed about TypeScript, right? Right now, after understanding that, we need to understand about the basic TypeScript architecture. We already learned about what are the features of TypeScript over JavaScript. Technically, TypeScript is for developers. It transcompiles everything into JavaScript. So why developers have to prefer TypeScript? Few points we understood. Next, today we are going to understand about the basic TypeScript architecture. The basic TypeScript architecture. We need to understand about the TypeScript architecture. So how actually TypeScript works? What is the infrastructure of TypeScript? So in order to start working with TypeScript, you should know how TypeScript handles everything. Actually, the key point I told you that TypeScript is built by using TypeScript. TypeScript built by using TypeScript. That means TypeScript is a language which is built by TypeScript itself. That means it supports all the low-level features which can directly interact with the compilers and hardware services. So what are the important components of TypeScript architecture? Let's see what are the components of TypeScript architecture. Let's take a look about TypeScript architecture, what it comprises of. So the basic TypeScript architecture, its components. This is the basic TypeScript architecture. This is the basic TypeScript architecture. So TypeScript comprises of all this. TypeScript comprises of all this. And you need to understand what is the purpose of this. Actually, when we are dealing with TypeScript, as already we discussed that it is entirely handled by the TypeScript language. It is built by using TypeScript language. If you belong to any software technology, you know a little bit about TypeScript, about any language, any software, then some terms are very common across all the technologies and languages. If you know the terms, then you can understand the architecture very easily. Terms are important, and if you know the terms, you can easily understand. So we will concentrate on that point here to understand the TypeScript architecture actually. So important terms means I'm talking about the concepts like compiler. Compiler is one important term. Service is another important term. Server is another important term. Shim and managed. These are important terms. Usually, software developers they come across with these terms regularly. If you belong to different software technologies, you know softwares, then these terms are common everywhere. And if you know the meaning of those terms, it is easy to understand any architecture, not only TypeScript. In any architecture, if anyone is talking about these terms, then you can easily understand about that. You can easily understand about that. So let's take a look about this. What are these terms and how to handle them? So what are these terms and how to handle them? We will discuss about that, right? If you are going to learn everything here, that's the reason you will understand every point. No need to worry about that. But if you know this, then it is very easy. You can tell by yourself actually if you know all this. Okay, let's take a look about this. In the TypeScript architecture, from the bottom, first we have a TypeScript core compiler. We have a TypeScript core compiler. We are having a TypeScript core compiler. So TypeScript have two compilers actually. One is standalone TypeScript compiler and core TypeScript compiler. Actually, the meaning of compiler everyone knows. In computer programming, a compiler is responsible for translating. A compiler is responsible for translating the high-level code into the machine level. It is responsible for translating. That means the basic point first we know is about compiler. Actually, compiler it is used as translator. Compiler is used as a translator. It is a translator. It is used to translate into the understandable language. Now here in TypeScript, technically compiler is used as translator. Here we have two compilers in TypeScript. So we have a TypeScript core compiler. You can see the TypeScript core compiler. So the core TypeScript compiler. And we have another compiler is standalone compiler. What are these two compilers in TypeScript? The TypeScript core compiler and standalone compiler. We have two compilers in TypeScript. The core compiler is responsible for, the core TypeScript compiler is responsible for identifying the syntactical errors in the code that you have written in TypeScript. That means a developer writes TypeScript, the code in TypeScript. That means first point is developer writes code in TypeScript. Then core TypeScript compiler verifies the keywords, syntaxes, verifies the keywords and syntax So not only keywords and syntax, it verifies keywords, it verifies syntax, it verifies the blocks. That means where it is starting, where it is ending. It verifies the types. That means it verifies the data types. So data types, that means are the data types the same what TypeScript can understand? Are the data types same that what type of memory is allocated for them? Understanding the keywords that you have written, understanding the syntax you have written, the blocks you have defined, that means start, end blocks are there properly or not, data types are correctly configured or not. So memory allocation is properly defined or not. All such things it will verify. The core TypeScript compiler verifies everything. So, and after verifying, what it can do is it reports. After verifying, it reports the errors. It reports the errors. That means actually you can say that it reports the errors if there are problems in the keywords, if there are problem in syntaxes, if there are problem in the blocks you have written, the data types you have defined, that is all managed by the TypeScript core compiler. The TypeScript core compiler is responsible for compiling the TypeScript code written by developer, and it verifies the keywords, syntaxes, blocks, data types, memory allocations, and everything, and reports if there are any problems in that. For that, it uses a lot of files. Remember, we are learning high-level architecture. That means outline architecture. Internal architecture, you will able to understand after you finish TypeScript. Because for that, you need to be strong in TypeScript to understand internal architecture, right? How the data types are verified, how the data types are checked. That you need to understand, that you can understand only when you learn TypeScript. So this is high level. And low level architecture of TypeScript you will understand once you finish TypeScript. So the main compiler we are having is a core compiler. Observe in that TypeScript core compiler, there is a core TS, there is program TS, there is scanner TS, there is parser TS, there is checker TS, there is emitter TS. You will able to understand about every file once you start working with TypeScript. This is not the right time to discuss about those files. This is only the time to understand about what it is actually, because you will understand what is the role of core TS, program TS. TS is TypeScript file. As I told you, entire TypeScript is designed in TypeScript. So this is the TypeScript files. Just basic point I will tell you. For example, the scanner.ts is responsible for monitoring the input activities. When user inputs the values, assigns the values, verifying the input activities is done by scanner. Emitter is responsible for managing the output activities, sending output as a response, sending output for the request. All such output related activities are managed by emitter. Parser is responsible for converting one type to another type. Understanding the type, converting the type is done by parser. Checker is responsible for identifying, verifying whether the memory allocated and the value assigned the type are same type or not, it will check. Program is responsible for identifying the keywords defined in the program, syntaxes defined in the program, blocks defined in the program. The core compiler will identify the structure of the program is correctly defined or not. If structure is correct, first structure is correct, so blocks are correctly configured. That means every file have its own functionality. All these are maintained by a TypeScript core compiler. TypeScript core compiler. So TypeScript core compiler is responsible for translating the code, compiling the code written by developer. Developer will first write the code in TypeScript. It is first compiled, it is verified. After verification, if everything is fine, that means there are no problems in syntaxes and everything. Now, this compiled TypeScript file, remember, after compilation, it will not generate any new file. After compilation, so it will keep everything in the same file. That means generally some programming languages, after compilation, they will generate another file like exe files, DLL files. I hope many of you know about that. But TypeScript compiler, core compiler, is not going to generate any file. It is just going to first verify, is everything written in your TypeScript file is correct or not? Is according to the language standards or not? Are all syntactically correct or not? That it will verify. So TypeScript core compiler will verify everything. After verifying, if it is free of errors, there are no errors, then this file is taken by standalone compiler. It is taken by standalone compiler. So TypeScript core compiler will identify all the problems you written in the TypeScript code. If it is free, then it is ready to be transcompiled. That means now another compiler will come to picture. That is standalone TS compiler. What this standalone TS compiler will do is, you written a program .ts in TypeScript. So the core compiler will compile this, and the compiled code is kept in the same program again. That means there is no new file generated, only TypeScript. But this TypeScript program is not understandable to browser. Then TypeScript uses another compiler, that is a standalone compiler, TSC, TypeScript standalone compiler. This TypeScript standalone compiler will take the successfully compiled program of your TypeScript, and it will convert this into program.js JavaScript. It will convert into JavaScript. That means the transcompiler, we call this as a transcompiler. Standalone compiler is a transcompiler. That means it is going to transcompile the TypeScript code into JavaScript. That means it will translate all the TypeScript code into JavaScript. Now the JavaScript code is ready. The JavaScript code is ready. This you can integrate into any HTML page or any another, because JavaScript files means you can put in Node.js server side also, you can handle them, use them. That means now it is ready as a JavaScript file so that you can integrate with HTML or integrate with any server side, right? That means there are two compilers in TypeScript. One is the TypeScript core compiler. Another one is TypeScript standalone compiler. I hope Everyone is clear with these 2 points. The core compiler is used for verifying, all the syntactical problems in your code, right? Right. And important is the transcompiling is done by using a standalone compiler. So verifying and transcompiling, everything is done by using this. So two compilers are there. So the core TypeScript compiler, developer will write the code in TypeScript. Core TypeScript compiler verifies the keywords and all. It reports the errors. So if it is compiled successfully, then it is ready for transcompiling. Transcompiling means translating into some other language. It is translating into some other language. Now, what are the components? The key components, the key components in TypeScript core compiler are, we have the key components like core.ts, we have program.ts, we have scanner.ts, we have emitter.ts. So we have parser and checker.ts, parser.ts, we have checker.ts. All these are responsible for handling different functionalities. Those you will understand once you start working with TypeScript, but a basic overview I given you. So this is the purpose of TypeScript core compiler. That is the purpose of TypeScript core compiler. Now we have a standalone compiler. It is a compiler. It is a compiler. Use it to transcompile the TypeScript code into JavaScript. That means it transcompiles the TypeScript code into JavaScript. That means TSC is a transcompiler for TypeScript, which creates you can simply say that which generates a JavaScript file, That means actually what happens is you return some demo.ts, then it is taken by tsc.ts. That means this is actually the standalone compiler. This compiler is responsible for generating demo.js. That means it transcompiles into JavaScript. That is what actually the purpose of the two compilers in TypeScript architecture. So we have a core compiler and we have a standalone compiler. That's okay. So fine. Next, you have a language service, services.ts. Can you tell me what is a service? What you know about service? What is a service? What do you know about service? Can you tell? Just ping the message. What is a service? What you know about service? Please lower your hands, people. It's waste of time in raising the hand. I will never get back to you until class is finished, right? Service. Good. So many. Okay, fine. Good. Business operations, interact with database, reusable thing. That's great. Good. Uh, Service provides some functionality. Good. Operations. Good. Injectable class. Great. Good. Right. Okay. Fine. Okay then. Okay. Let's do into that. Right. So okay. Right. Good. Everyone is very good. Right. So yes. So yeah, I it's great that you all have good idea about a service. So technically, now tell me what might be a language service for TypeScript. What might be what you are thinking about that? What might be a language service? What you are thinking? Now combine that point. Language service means a service for language. In that way you understand a service for language. Which language we are using? TypeScript language now. For TypeScript language, what might be a language service means? What might be language service means? Um, mhm. What you are thinking? What might be a language service means? Service, what it is? You great, good. All people given a good answer for that. What might be a language service? Can you tell about that? What might be a language service? What you are thinking about that? Okay, let me tell you. Here, let me tell you. Good. Okay, right. Okay. Functions, libraries, great, good. Right. Okay, fine. Okay. See, language service means fine. Okay, fine. Language service is nothing but language service means I told you that TypeScript core compiler is actually going to TypeScript core compiler is going to verify whether my syntaxes are correct, keywords are correct, the blocks are correct or not. Now point is from where it will verify, from where it is going to verify, where is the repository for our language so that it can check from there, right? That is language service. That means language service provides all the repository that is needed for TypeScript in order to verify whether the code written is according to the rules, according to the standards of TypeScript language. That means language service contains all the repository of TypeScript. You can simply say that repository of TypeScript. Now compilers will verify everything from that service. That means a compiler will check whether the syntax you written correct or not. And who will provide that syntax service? Language service. Who will verify data types are correct or not? Language service. Compiler is doing, but from where it is getting the information about it? Actually, compiler is verifying. Now the question is, from where the compiler is verifying? Compiler is verifying from language service. I hope everyone understood. Everyone clear about that? That means what is a language service? I hope everyone clear about this. What is a language service, right? Technically, so language service is nothing but it contains all the repository that a compiler needs to compile, right? Remember, these are all predefined. right? These are all predefined. Remember, you are learning about the architecture of a language. Architecture of a language means it is ready-made available. You can build a library by yourself. That is the secondary part. We are not talking about our own library. We are talking about the library available within TypeScript, built-in library for TypeScript. That means what the purpose of TypeScript compiler. The purpose of TypeScript compiler is to verify whether you written as per the standards of TypeScript or not. Whatever you written are available in TypeScript or not. Now the simple point is from where it will verify that. It will verify from language service. It will verify from language service. That is good. That is important. So that means technically, what is language service? What is the concept about service? That means we have a language service. So compiler, it is used for that purpose. Another one, we have a service. Service, it is a predefined, it is a predefined business logic. So it is a predefined business logic with reusable functions. It is a predefined business logic with reusable functions. So here, what is a language service? That means we have TypeScript language service. That means it provides all the repository. Repository is the library. It provides all the library for TypeScript language. All the library for TypeScript language. That means the keywords, the functions, right? Keywords, functions. So syntax, all are verified. All are verified from language service. That means whatever you are trying to use are verified by language service, and it is under the control of a file. A file is responsible for doing that, and that is services.ts. I said that TypeScript compiler will verify your syntax of a method. We will verify the syntax of a function. How it will verify? For example, I am writing here some array dot, we have a property length. Actually, array dot length is a number, and you are assigning some string. Or you are reading it, or you are assigning something into it. That means now important, this says that it is invalid. Why? Because so length is a number, and you are trying to assign some string into it. Now the point is, so number, and it cannot assign string. Now the point is, this length, where it is present, what is its data type? So who is providing support for this? The language service is providing for that. That means language service have all this repository. It will tell that this is not string type, it is a number type. You please assign a number into it, right? All such things are defined in the service. So that is what actually the purpose of a service. So whatever your compiler needs to verify and compile in the TypeScript language is provided by the language service. Right? That is what actually the concept of language service. Hope everyone is clear about these 3 points. Core compiler, standalone compiler, and language service. Now, another important component in the TypeScript is TS server. Now tell me, what is the purpose of a server? What is the purpose of a server? What do you know about server? TypeScript is open source. So if you are not there in yesterday's session, right? Yeah. Server. That's good, right? When we talk about server, you have to always talk about one key point, host. I need to hear the word hosting. Server is for hosting. You tell different answers that will not be correct, satisfying for that, right? Because server will do all of the works, but the main purpose is hosted. That means where your all operations are hosted. Now tell me, what might be a TypeScript server? Now tell me what might be a TypeScript server. TS server. What might be a TypeScript server? Tell me what might be a TypeScript server. TypeScript server. That's great, right? That means it is the location. It is the location where all the TypeScript services are hosted. That means loading your TypeScript program, compiling your TypeScript program, and hosting your the TypeScript services is all done by using a TypeScript server. Good. So you all are correct. I hope everyone is clear, right? That means TypeScript server is the location where all the TypeScript services are hosted. TypeScript services means we are talking about language services. That means loading your programs, compiling your programs, generating an output, and rendering the output back as a response. All this is managed by a TypeScript server. That means TypeScript server is responsible for compiling. It means it is responsible for hosting your programs, compiling your programs, processing them, generating output, and sending means generating a response and sending response back as output. Everything is managed in TypeScript server. That means TypeScript server is the location where all this will happen. What will happen? Standalone compiler, TypeScript core compiler, language server, right? So everything, see, if they talk about server, that means it will have everything what is required for hosting and loading and executing. Am I right? Generally, a server will contain. I already told you, we will discuss about internal architecture later. What is present in server.ts, you are not at that level now to understand about that. Don't worry about this, right? I already told you in the beginning, we are going to discuss the high level architecture of this application. Now, don't worry about what is inside TypeScript server.ts, sir. That is not at your level now, because for that you need to learn TypeScript first to understand everything, right? That means you are just in the beginning level, so you cannot postmortem that. You cannot go into that until or unless you start knowing about it, right? That's the reason it is not the right time to understand what is present in TypeScript server, right? Here the session is at the beginner level. Then you need to just understand what is inside it. That will be done once you finish it. That's the point you need to understand, right? So as of now, I hope everyone is clear. So what is the standalone compiler? What is the core compiler? What is language service? And what is TypeScript server? So what you understood by TypeScript server? It is the location where all the TypeScript programs are loaded, compiled, processed, and generated output. Entire TypeScript related program execution will happen in this server. This is the location where everything happens. Okay, that's great. Now, have you heard about shim? Do you know anything about shim? In computer programming, shim, S-H-I-M. No, no. Okay, 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 okay. Fine, fine, fine. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Now, actually, let me tell you one point. I think you know seafood. In seafood, you heard about shrimp, seafood. You heard about it, huh? Prawns and shrimp. You know, obviously, huh? Huh. Huh. Do you know the specialty of that shrimp? What do you know about that specialty of shrimp? It belongs to prawns family only. But what is a shrimp? It is tasty, everything fine. That is your food-based concept. Now come into programming concept. Many people may not be aware of that. Do you know shrimp is gender neutral? Shrimp is gender neutral. Gender neutral. That means shrimp, S-H-R-I-M-P, shrimp. In that shim, S-H-I-M, shim means neutral. Shim is neutral. Now tell me, what may be the role of this shim in TypeScript? In computer programming, what do you think this neutral means? Are you getting my point? Actually, what you may not know that shrim is gender neutral. That's great. That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's good. Good. Platform independent. That's good. Now tell me what shim.ts may do. What shim may do, ts do? In any high level programming language, you have shims. Only the point is you never heard about them because you are not into such in-depth about programming. Your Java also have shims. .NET also have shims. Every programming language which says that I am cross-platform, that have a shim concept. Only the point is you don't know that much level about the programming. That is only the concept. But every programming language which is having a cross-platform ability is because of shim. Now tell me what shim is going to do is it is going to generate the code in such a way which is understandable to every browser, every operating system, every device. Understood? Is everyone clear? So then why it is called VS? VS. Actually, VS means Visual Studio. Actually, that is Microsoft. So it is a VS shim, Visual Studio shim. That means it because TypeScript belongs to Microsoft, right? It is called as Microsoft shim. This Microsoft shim is nothing but it is Visual Studio shim. It is nothing but it is responsible for translating your TypeScript code into the code which is understandable to every operating system service. Which is understandable to every operating system service. Understood? That means it is responsible for translating into, means it makes your TypeScript program as operating system neutral, platform independent. That is important. That is important in TypeScript architecture. So that is the role of a shim. That is the role of a shim. That means now what is done by using this? That means we have another important number 4 is we have a language service. We have a language service and we have a TypeScript server. We have a TypeScript server. So TS server. TS server. So it is actually managed by server.ts. That means server.ts. That means it is responsible for hosting, hosting, compiling, and processing, and generating output of TypeScript programs. It is responsible for hosting, compiling, processing, generating output for TypeScript programs. That means it is the location. It is the location where TypeScript programs are compiled and processed. That is a simple point you need to know about it. And we have VS Shim. So VS Shim, actually it is responsible for translating your TypeScript code into platform independent code, translating into platform independent code. So independent code, platform independent code. Generally you call it as technically bytecode, right? It is into that bytecode. That is what actually platform independent code. That's what actually VS Shim does. And now we have another option. Now, what is managed language service? VS managed language service. In computer programming, I think many of you heard about 2 points in many computer programming. So one is about managed code and unmanaged code. Can you tell what is managed code? Mr. Anil, you are telling difference between server and engine. You are telling directly difference itself. You are not asking question. Right? You are telling that what is TS server, what is Chrome EV8 engine. Right? Clearly, it is saying that it is an engine, it is a server. Don't you know the difference between engine and server if you are asking question about engine and server? Mr. Anil, don't you know the difference between engine and server? Right. Now tell me, what do you think managed language service? Managed language service. Managed code means, remember one thing, the managed code and unmanaged code is nothing but the code understandable to every device. Unmanaged code means it is understandable only to specific operating system. Unmanaged code is understandable to only specific operating system. Managed code is understandable to every operating system. That means translating into understandable of every operating system is done by VS Shim. After doing that, the library required to make every operating system understand, that library is maintained in service. It is a service, na? That means the managed service contains the library which is understandable across all platforms. across every browser, across every environment. Now, what is difference between the language service? This language service is only for TypeScript, and this managed language service both for TypeScript and JavaScript. I hope everyone understood that now. The language service is previously for TypeScript, and now the language service is for both TypeScript and JavaScript. I hope everyone understood that. That means managed language service contains the library understandable for both JavaScript and TypeScript. Simple. Is there any complex? Language service is not understandable to browsers. Language service is understandable to only TypeScript. Then how it will go on to browser? How every browser can understand about it? Every browser can understand if it is cross-platform. That means the language service is only for TypeScript. Managed language service is for both. So JavaScript, TypeScript, both can understand. Because obviously whatever is there in JavaScript, TypeScript can understand. But whatever there in TypeScript, every browser cannot understand. That's the reason the library need to be designed so that it can understand. I hope everyone understood about that. Clearer? What is a managed language service? Yes, right. So that means who is responsible for generating this managed library? Who is responsible for generating managed library? Who is responsible for generating this managed library? Who will do that? Who is responsible for generating the managed library? VS Shim, that's what you learned. VS Shim. Who means, I'm not asking any person name, right? I'm asking inside the architecture who is doing that, right? Not or the company name, right? Who is doing that? Which component? So let be more clear. Which component is responsible for generating the managed library? Managed library, which is responsible for doing that? That is done by whom? That is done by VS Shim, right? Yes, that's what actually the point about VS Shim. So VS managed language service. Yes. VS managed language service. VS managed language service. Language service. That means it contains the library. So which is simply cross-platform. That's it. Which is understandable across every operating system services. That's what actually is. And another last important option in the architecture. So we have editors. So editors contains the rules for a language. So rules for a language, rules for an IDE, not language, rules for an IDE. That means integrated development environment. It contains the rules for IDE in order to handle TypeScript. The IDE can be so many. VS Visual Studio Code. It can be like Sublime. It can be like WebStorm. It can be like Dreamweaver. It can be Eclipse, right? So it can be so many. Notepad++, Edit+, you can use anything. That means whatever the support needed for an IDE to handle your TypeScript, that is configured. Those rules are configured and defined by the editors. That means while writing the code, showing some intelligence, identifying the problems and defining them before they are compiled. all such things are managed by the editors. So editors is a component which contains information that helps the various editors to handle TypeScript. That's what actually editor comprises of, right? That is the basic architecture of TypeScript. So we have a core compiler, standalone compiler, language service, TypeScript server, VS shim, and managed language service and editors. These are all the components of TypeScript architecture, right? Once you know this architecture, now we can start working with TypeScript language practically. How to install TypeScript, how to configure TypeScript, how to start programming in TypeScript, we will see. Once you start working with TypeScript, you can explore every component in detail later. What is TS server, what is VS shim, how will they work? You can explore them, you can understand them later detail. I hope you are clear with this. Everyone is clear with this. So then how to start working with TypeScript, that we will see in tomorrow's session. Okay. So today is enough, and tomorrow we will continue. And in tomorrow's session, we can start working with TypeScript practically. Clearer? Right. I hope everyone is clear.